Well, hello, folks. It's a lovely morning, and I'm just having fun. It's a hot, humid day. Here already, I'm sweating. But anyway, enough about me. What I want to do today is talk to you about jade plants, how to propagate them, how to create styles and designs with them, but mainly how to propagate these plants. Simple and easy. Also, I want to talk to you a little bit about these maples over here, which are Trident Maples. These are cuttings that I rooted, and we've got at least one in there that's close to 2 inches, but mainly about 1 inch. And so for right now, let's deal with. I was looking at this plant, which I had to, my thought was to set this in a cascade form. And this was the main branch coming down. And I deal with so many plants that I have to use natural means of growing and getting some of the styles that I want in a rough and general way. Okay, I do use wire. This is just electrical wire that I found. I do have bonsai wire, but electrical wire will do also, just for rough styling and movement. But as time passed, this cascade branch right here was superseded by this upgrowing branch, which was much smaller than this at the time. So over time, this branch has become weaker, this branch superior, and much larger. This secondary branch, which I was going to use as a crown in the back, it's doing pretty good, so I like that. Now, I could hardwire this thing and even raffia it and bring this down to create a different cascade movement out of this. But for me, that's a lot of work, okay? No need. So what I'm going to do today is just remove this, and we'll do something else, okay? And part of why I would take this off is to show you that it doesn't take a whole bunch of effort to root these things or to create a style that's pretty nice. And later on we'll have a special, well, 3 special guests that we'll be showing you. These are rooted pieces. These had roots on them already when I cut them off of the parent plant. And from this same batch here, I stuck these into this container. And you can see their roots. Doesn't take a whole lot, but they have roots on it. And you see how dry the soil is. Okay? So it doesn't take a lot. Also, I just pulled these 3 cups several days ago, and when I trimmed up some other plants, and I stuck them right into this soil, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, lots of different plants here, and they grow relatively fast. This plant was pretty much, I will say, in the springtime when I up potted them from a small container like this, just so it will grow larger. It was no larger than one of these, you know, at the base. So it's grown substantially. I've got plenty of branches here. I can wire this at any time to create a little styled bigger, but again, I'm looking to get larger plants as I up pot these and move them around. Again, different size pots, different size plants, and you can see that this is a pretty sizable plant, even larger than this in the gallon pot. And again, I can cut this back at any time. I can take one branch, remove the rest, and start my movement just by clipping growth. Okay? And again, I've got wire on here. This is some aluminum wire. When I had some electrical work done, some scrap bonsai wire that was previously used, and right here, this is like a raft form that I'm working with. Okay, so between the winds and the rains, this thing has been beat around, but again, the wire gives me an idea of what I had in place, even though the plant may have moved. And so as I create this raft form, you can see the base of that. I'll know what I can do with the top. Okay? And still, a deep container, whether it's a cascade form you're looking for, or you want more roots for a root over rock configuration, you want a deep container so the roots can grow down, and you try to water it from the bottom mainly. There's always going to be water coming in at the top from the rain or as you're watering in the area, so that's not a problem. But when you get the best flow of water coming in from the bottom, the roots will seek that water more so than staying up here where your watering is. And most often, unless you're watering, 3, 4, 5 hours a day, the water level where the moisture remains soaked or saturated is in the first several inches of your soil. The rest just flows through, and it'll likely be moist, but you won't have the greatest amount, believe it or not, you won't have the greatest amount of soil or moisture down here. You'll have it up here until the roots take in the moisture or evaporation takes place, and then you'll have the dry part up here. So you see the many branches here. This was just sitting on a bench, and little morning glory vines started growing up the plant. And most of these upper branches really don't matter, but they matter for the plant gaining girth and branching. So a lot of this will be cut back and even cut off depending on what I see once I start styling it. Okay, and you can say the general rough cascade movement, or I can take this and wire it in an upright position, or once I remove it from the pot, I can reposition that and wire this down into a cascade form. Generally speaking, I don't use raffia on the jade plants, but you can use raffia also as you're doing a hard wire and bend on that. And if you're good at wiring your plants and wrapping raffia, you'll be successful. And again, I even prop that up with the stick. Just another deal. Well, this one is on a rock tentatively, so I'll have to pull this, reset the roots, and then go from that point. So, talking about propagating these plants. again. I think that just because I want to show you, it doesn't matter what size cutting that you take. I'm going to cut this down and root this piece up here and then let this regrow. I can do that because I've got dozens, well, hundreds of young plants. You know, it's not a problem. Plus, I can only eat so many of these things. I don't really eat them. So anyway, let me take this wire off. Then I'll cut this up and show you how I set the pieces. Oh, by the way, if you have a tree that is wired, generally speaking, you want to cut the wire off rather than uncoil the tree, especially if it's something that's somewhat delicate like the skin of this jade plant, because you don't want to damage that skin, or you want to minimize the damage to it at least. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now the fact here, I can bring this down this way, do that, or I can wire it in that configuration. But so now that I have this, I can think of this as a cascade working. Or I can just cut that off, start another plant, which and already in my mind, I have a style and a plan for this. Okay, so pieces like this, no problem, but you may consider if you want a branch low down to the ground, you can either cut that back, or you can make this later on for a cascade, you know, semi-cascade. And you can take that entire piece and root it, or you can cut it back. There. This is older wood. That's a nice piece also. So all of that. Now, most people are taught, or you see it in books, or where you may hear it, that you leave these laying out for several days, you know, so that the end can dry and prevent root rot or basal rot. Okay? So I don't have time to let them sit around because I've got so much going on. But what you do, instead of leaving it out, you take soil. This is not wet. This is moist soil. Okay? And all right. So anyway, you did push the silver button on top. Okay. So anyway, this is not powder dry, but this soil is lightly damp. Okay. Even if the soil was sand dry, not a problem. But what you don't want to do now is wet this. So what you want to do is prepare your cuttings, and generally speaking, if I'm doing a hardwood cutting or certain other cuttings, especially if I'm using a large piece, I'll sink it halfway into the soil. But with these things, they root really easily. So just down into the soil they go. Not a problem. This right here, you don't have to wound anything here. Go down into the soil. Just make sure you have good contact around the base, and it's not a problem. Again, the normal way, you don't want to have leaves or foliage underneath the soil, so you want to remove that. So if you have a stem, a side stem, that's okay, but just remove the leaves from that and press it into the soil. Not a problem. This right here. Now, with that wound, I won't press that. Into the soil. What I will do, put some wound sealing on it. Okay? And so that's all you have to do. Don't water it, and depending on your environment, you can put it in the shade, put it in full sun, it doesn't matter. Just let it sit for at least a week or so. If the soil is somewhat moist, if the soil is completely dry, then after several days, no less than 3 days, but 3 to 5 days, then you can water it, give it a good soaking, and then let it go for, depending on how hot and how things dry out on your pot, you want to let it dry out again, just as if you were caring for a live plant. So also, once you remove the leaves, you can just sit these right on the soil, or if you've got you know, some aggregate of some sort, you can just sit it right there in a semi-shady area, and these will put out little pups at the base of that leaf. So I'll deal with all of these later. So all of these, as a matter of fact, pretty much all of these come from the same plant. I'm just going to sit these down here, so bear with me for a moment. Several years back, I found a jade plant in a nursery. It was in a pot. The pot was knocked over. The base of that jade plant was awesome, and so I found the folks running the place, and I asked them to sell me that, because sometimes very old and large material is just used as stock material, and it's not for sale. But they sold me that, and believe it or not, after I took cuttings and started other pieces, that base plant died on me. So I have other plants that I started and grew up from that, and again, all of these from the same plant. So just stay right there, don't move, don't pause, don't stop, because we have some special guests here. This is one of the plants. That's another. And the big bopper. These are pieces from the original plant. This was a cutting probably as big as my little finger there, and as you can see, it's pretty substantial now. And these cuttings that I showed you in the demo came off of this several weeks ago. Okay, this plant I just restyled. Well, all the plants I took the wire off of it and restyled it, repositioned. This thing grew so much, so fast, that this crown was laying down over here, even with a single strand of wire on it. And so I had to support it until I could get in and trim things out and come in here and cut it back. And then I doubled up on the wire and repositioned it. And it's not done yet. I'm letting some of these tertiary branches fill out a little more, then I'll cut them back, and then they'll redivide again. And again, the idea is to wrap that around there, but I'm not ready to fully wire this yet, and I am letting it grow, and I'm starting to get some tertiary branching down in this area, as you can see here. And a lot of that growth here is due to the treatment that I had up here several weeks ago. Also, when you're working with these, after you cut them, don't water them. Just let them go dry a little bit, and the leaves will start shriveling a little bit on you, and you can let it shrivel, stay that way, 2, 3, 4 days, and then go ahead and give it a good soaking. Don't just water it, especially if you have restricted pots like this. You don't want to just water it from the top. Put it in a soak tub, water it from the top, water everything, and you want to give it partial shade. Don't let it be out in the open, direct sun, okay? Because you'll get some scorching, which I do have, but the leaves will fill out nice and beautiful, full, and you're good to go. I use a poly-coated fertilizer for a 3-month duration that it's listed as. They sell them by brand name, but I don't advertise for folks. So you know the little brown beads just fell out. Or I use a water-soluble liquid fertilizer as general purpose. Now pour it over the entire affair, let it some of it being the soap. Also, I use 0-10-10 and the fish emulsion formula. You know, I mix it up, or I alternate it, you know, as I'm fertilizing the plants. But again, when I'm growing these, I let them grow somewhat helter-skelter at random for a good period of time, mainly to get girth on the base, and all of this is helping the girth. Plus, these are giving me new starts that I can use later, okay? And if I get an outer balanced affair, then I can cut that back, take those others, root them, but I have a nice base here to work with, and then I can style this any way I want to, okay? So again, I just let the cuttings go crazy for a while. I fertilize them well, and I keep them in a partial shade, not direct sunlight. So anyway, now I want to bring my attention over here to that bucket on the ground over there, camera person. On the ground, not in the sky. That's an airplane up there. So anyway, these are cuttings. I have roots in the bottom, so something is rooted in there. I've had broadleaf trees, hardwood, to have good growth on it, but when I pulled them out of the pot, no roots. The roots didn't break as I pulled them or removed them from the pot. It's just that the wood has had enough energy to sustain that. And if you can see right here, I have a dead piece of wood here, but I have a pot inside of here, and I have this large pot right here, okay? So this piece has started callousing over, and it even had a fine little piece of root on it. That started callousing over, but again, it succumbed. And I believe the problem here was that I took off, I guess, in the latter part of the spring, and I didn't get this watered well. And this was covered over with a tent plastic covering, and I had stakes in here, poles, to keep the plastic off of any new growth that would have sprung up. Well, I didn't get that water in here like I needed to. Also, this outer rim, and you have this in here, isn't really meant for rooting. I'm always, well, not always, but I'm often, because I do go to sleep sometimes, I often experiment with things, and if I got space, I'm going to try to use it anyway. Okay, so these on the outer perimeter pretty much didn't take. This one seems like it's taken. The wood itself is dark and discolored, mold, fungus, or whatever, but we'll see here in a minute. So I've got 2 pieces out of 2, 4, 6, out of 8 on this outer ring that seems to have taken. Now this is about 1.5 inch piece on the outer rim that seem to have taken. And the way this pot was situated, north, south, east, and west, this area was kind of to the south, as I remember it, okay? And this was kind of like north. So that on the back side, it survived. To this point, this survives also. Now this is on the inner ring. This is about right at about 2 inches. These leaves are discolored, so it's trying to survive, but it may have a few roots on it, but I don't really expect this, once I pull it out, to be thriving and really saturated in roots. And there's only 2 pieces in here, okay? Because this was my large piece that I wanted, these 2 that I wanted to root. And again, the purpose for this out here is to cool the inner pot, to hold the coolness as we're coming out of the fall, or well, depending on when you take it. If you take your cuttings in the fall, you got to go through the winter and all of that, okay? But coming out into the spring, if you just had the one pot, the pot will heat up, okay? And when it heats up, that takes energy out of the plant. Well, my deal is to keep the root, the cutting part under the soil, cool, so that it could moderate the energy expenditure of that cutting. Lots of sugar in there, lots of energy, and the plant gets to use that if it's moderated. And that's why this outer area is here. That's why I have this bucket inside of another bucket. And again, nothing is absolute, and then there's always that one feature of anything that is just different. So let's see what we can do here. See the roots. And in here, you can see there's roots in there, and then roots there. So something was growing. Well, there's no critters growing in the bottom of this. The roots were actually growing out of the drain holes, but of course they were circling around in the bottom also. Okay. That just has one, don't move, just one big root, so I'll set that in a container. Smaller root, but this is still pretty good. And you can see here roots in here. The roots are coming out of the bottom of the pot. So we'll see what we've got. And as I suspected with this one, the leaves are light. There are no roots on this, though it's callous. It still has good color because it was deep into this one pot being protected. But again, this is what I was going for. Okay? Director, producer, actor, I can do it all except hold the camera and point it. So anyway, this is what I was going for. That's 2 inches plus actually, but that's an entire tree from something that was going to be cut off and thrown away anyway. Okay, so just a little time, just a few moments, and this is what you could come up with. So what I'm going to do here is I'll show you what I'm going to do. This one piece right here, I'm going to do this with it. He goes there, he goes there. Same thought, smaller pot. Same process. Oh, by the way, this is my famous tan sand. It's just filler sand. It's what they put houses on when they're building them. When they build a new house, they just put that on the dirt, on the ground, and that's what they build on. That house would have been another foot higher if I hadn't stole all this dirt. No. I could have put some rooting hormone on that stump, but I didn't start that way, so I'm just going to continue the way that I'm going. So anyway, you don't need to see me pot this stuff up or anything like that, so I'm going to call it quits. It's hot out here, and as you can see, I'm pretty well soaked now. Not a problem. This is what I do. And I've got a bunch of sarissa cuttings right over here on the ground, as the camera points down, that I started potting these in individual cups, but I need more mature and larger pieces, so these I'll take out of the pot and just plant them along the walkway, the driveway, any place I can find. Hello?
Yes.
Camera person? Any place I can find soil to put stuff in. So as everybody's looking at my feet while I'm talking to you, camera person is going to point the camera to the sky so that you still can't see me. I love you. But anyway, this is it.